Welcome to Talk to Me. I'm your host, Brenda Warren, the Soulutionist. My guest today, Chesline Pierre-Paul, is a change agent, transformational coach, and a social impact maven. Chesline has been featured on Women in Language, She Owns Success, Polyglot Conference Global, The Hambone Show, Happier by the Minute, the Accent World Podcast, Callum Connects, just to name a few. Chesline created a space where healing and positive disruption makes lasting global social impact. The number one skill set Chesline brings to the table every day, every time is love. Chesline, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm feeling fantastic. How could I not after this beautiful presentation?
You know, I'm so excited for you to be here today because as we talk about transformational coaching and social impact, I couldn't think of anyone better to talk about that because the spaces that you create to get people to think differently, to change their paradigms and shift mindsets in ways that I've never seen before. And I'm hoping today that you'll be able to tell us, how did you start on this journey?
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I feel that, and every person, is its own living galaxy of privileges and underprivileges, that exist simultaneously, and it allows us to have easier or different access to the same spaces. And I guess for me, as a child growing up, I recognized this, my parents being incredible spirits and political refugees from Haiti. They lived in Bedford, Dominican Republic. They came here, and having the family, the blood family I've had, it allowed me also to recognize very clearly, the paradigms of privileges that exist on a systemic level through race and gender, and where I came to live in all those spaces. And then as Black and queer and multi-passionate, you learn to see the intersections where people like yourself are visible and where people like yourself are invisible, and you see where certain voices are dominant and where other voices are not even acknowledged. And then looking at it, I was recognizing that there are a lot of missed opportunities for people to be empowered innovationally, educationally, because they're born into those legacies of this is my paradigm, and I'm not even going to challenge the dominant voices that exist here. And so the more I would get in different spaces, different conversations, with entrepreneurs, with activists, the more I would see that each community and each industry operates very systemically and observes the same paradigms, but doesn't always challenge them in the way that would help them elevate their own practices as healers, as activists, as entrepreneurs. And as somebody who lives, and functions organizationally,
Mhm.
I recognize that and I go, what is the thing that you as an entrepreneur can learn from somebody who is not an entrepreneur, and vice versa? And what are things that you, as everything that you are, can learn to, just externalize in your practice? Because sometimes we look at, let's say, the quote unquote typical profile of somebody who does what we do, and it becomes easy then to deny different parts of ourselves that don't match that archetype, because we don't see the vindication of what we do. But then, exactly because you're the only person in that space who is empowered to do what only you can do, it's exactly for that we need you to come into your own. But again, it's not something that we come to do automatically. We're not conditioned or primed for it. So that's why I see the beauty in transformational coaching is to have that person who can look at what is the story you tell about yourself and you live, within,
Mhm.
and what are the parts of that that we want to enhance, what are the parts of that that we want to deprioritize. And a lot of that functions through different healing cycles for yourself, because then when you're empowered, you can share a story about different, self constructs or perceptions that you had about yourselves, that originally they are birthed from pain, but now you are on the other side of that pain and you're healed, so you can look at it in hindsight and make that pain necessary and an act of servanthood, right? But you cannot talk about a journey that you haven't healed from just yet, because you're missing a lot of that, self-analysis and self-reverence. And it just makes it an act of re-victimization on your end. But having, the perspective of transformational coaching, for me, it's looking at a soul that I have in front of me that's not particularly aware of, their own brilliance, and then teasing that out of them so that now they become more self-aware on that level. And then the question is, how do I pass my healing forward so that now my individual act of self-reverence becomes something that feeds something that is bigger and greater than myself. Yeah.
So on your website, it says, "Welcome to my world of positive disruption." What does positive disruption mean to you, and what does that look like?
Yes. So to me, it's a bit, what I was talking about is this idea that every time I'm welcome into a space,
Mhm.
right, and I see what normalcy looks like in that environment, it's very interesting because in that we see biases, in that we see beliefs, in that we see a perception of reality that is not always reality itself. And there are parts of that that serve us as people, and there are parts of that that don't. But because this is what is set in stone, this is what normal look like in that space, we don't always question it. And a lot of people just play along. So to me, positive disruption is once you're in a space and you can observe and feel what normalcy looks like as an entrepreneur in your world, for example, or as a healer or an activist, the question is, what are different elements in that space that are under challenged, underrepresented, that are not questioned, that are unexpected and unsuspected, that we can flip around, turn around, and then use that to be innovational in that space. But what's great about it is you're not bringing in anything new. It was always there. It was just not potentialized the way that it could have. And so to me, that's what positive disruption looks like. You're relanguaging to somebody what normalcy can look like, understanding what normalcy looks like to them right now. And that's fantastic because there's so much value you can bring to someone by understanding their story, the paradigms they live in, and yet also challenge them to reconsider both themselves in terms of the story they identifies with, and as well as the paradigms that they choose to promote. And oftentimes it's very subconscious. We're not particularly aware of that. And so the positivity in that is, let me turn your world upside down on some level. And as I do so, you recognize that this opens the door for you to be more change making in your agency and in your power.
Recently I had a situation, and it became uh, very enlightening to me, about some of the things you discuss about people's paradigms, how they see themselves, how they see the world, because of an
Mhm.
incident that happened to me, and I'll share with you here, and then I want you to speak on that. I recently met a gentleman, and people have perceptions of people based on our outward appearances, what they see and what they say. And the person was very nice to me in the
Mhm.
beginning,
Mhm.
and then I they asked me about my children, and I said I have one child, Alex, who's non-binary. And as soon as I said the term non-binary, the whole atmosphere in the room shifted.
Mhm.
See, my child was seen as a person and was acknowledged and recognized until I said my child was non-binary, and immediately the whole atmosphere of the room changed, and I felt the negativity, and my heart broke.
Mhm.
Are those some of the things when you're doing social impact and the changes that you do in the transformation coaches, that you deal with people's perceptions of how they see people? Because Alex did not change from the first time Alex was introduced until that person came in the knowledge of Alex gender recognition. Is it how Alex recognized his gender, their gender, excuse me.
Mhm. Yeah, no, as you said, it's very, yeah, it's very interesting because I feel the kind of work that I gravitate towards demands that there is a resistance about the work that I want to do. Because from people for certain folks that are conditioned by certain mentalities, one of the most offensive things to them is you being whole, you being affirmed,
Mhm.
and you being empowered and happy and joyful in how you embody yourself. And yeah, I've had different encounters on different levels, particularly around race and gender, for example, Where, as you said, the second certain words and realities are voiced out, and where the truth about them is being the one thing that cannot be negotiable in that conversation, a lot of the ugly and the beauty in people is conflicted at the same time. So it's this thing that if I say that I'm queer, for example, in a conversation, some people will have a very definite idea of what that means. And what I find very interesting when that occurs is all the other words that we know that we share, we never presume necessarily that our definitions is somebody else's definition.
Mm-hmm.
But the second we talk about gender, the second we talk about race, it's like we, as if, as a society, now people want to feel legitimate on some level to impose a definition that is personal to somebody that doesn't share their experience. And that's the problem, right? It's wanted to talk without listening.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel it's also a lack in humility and a lack in curiosity and intelligence, in the sense that I know what I mean when I say what I say. So
Mm-hmm.
on that level, I'm not learning if all I am doing is voicing that out unilaterally. What's interesting is when my definitions become a bridge for me to be empowered by somebody else's definition, and where the outcome of our exchange is not for us to try to convert people. Like I say, like Liza Nicole says, I'm not in the conversion business, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I say what I say, it's not with the intent of forcing you into my world, but it's for you to be enlightened by a different way of being that thing. And the reality of it is, when you have those conversations, or where you are coming with the mindset of having those conversations, a lot of people who hold on to the titles of I am open,
Mm-hmm.
that's when you can see how brittle they are in their claim of being open, right? Because to
Mm-hmm.
me, radical openness becomes so vital in the sense that I can completely understand somebody whose experience denies the legitimacy of my experience. I
Mm-hmm.
have no problem understanding people, let's say, that are racist, or people that are queerphobic.
Mm-hmm.
It's not to say that I validate that. I understand, because in that person, I see an opinion that is sustained by dominant discourse that legitimizes supremacy and racism and oppression systemically. And it's interesting to take, to tell apart where the individual being starts and ends, and where society domineers and how they think and how their mentality is shaped. Because as we say, when we people feel seduced by the idea of attacking an individual, is because they're misreading the situation. That person is part of a system. So what about we destabilize the system instead of individualizing hatred, so that now it has a body and it has a race and it has a name, right? But yeah, to go back to what you were saying, Brenda, that's the thing that happens, right? A lot. I'm doing my work, and the second I say the one word, it's like, oh, I can see some people tense up. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why I feel it's so important to be really connected to your tribe when you're doing this work. And whenever you sense something, acknowledge it. Because the biggest mistake in my line of work would be just to speed past that moment like it didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you can basically get to the core of what that reaction is, if it's fear, guilt, shame, whatever it is at its
Mm-hmm.
core, and then you get to use that emotion as a way to reappreciate the word. I said, just because you're coming in from a legacy of fear, guilt, prejudice, or fragility, is not to say that that word and that definition and that identity belongs to your experience in shame, fragility, guilt, and fear. But that's where a lot of folks stop. Oh, I have my trauma, I have my prejudice, and that's the only thing I allow myself to repeat and to rehash every time those words, those values or definitions come up. It's like they're disengaging before they even engage the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Because then when I talk, they're not hearing me. They're basically just being more invested into their own specific, narratives. And it's very ego driven on that level, right? It's as if to say, only I am entitled to that word. And the
Mm-hmm.
only way to interact with that word is through my experience. That is one experience of trauma, of prejudice, of fragility, of fear. And on top of that, there's no interaction with self awareness. Because when you're self aware, you're able to call out to yourself, oh, wow, I'm coming in from that place. You can see it for what it is. And you're able to tell apart where your fragility starts and what the reality of the definition of that word kicks in. But when we don't do that work, that's what happens. We have non dialogues. I say something, they say something, and we're all the lesser for it because we did not try to, we were not, we're not trying to receive the definition for somebody else's voice and experience. Because when we do that, it's impossible not to be touched. When I truly humanize you and your experiences, and I suspend my own narrative about that word, it's impossible for me not to be changed. And me being changed doesn't mean that, oh my goodness, now I'm going to talk like you talk. And no, it's not about that. It's about to say, now I'm able not to demonize somebody, or I'm able not to throw somebody out of humanity or humanhood just because they live differently. And it's also a way for me to understand you can be a fully acknowledged human and still live in complete contradiction with my own narrative. And that's something I can respect. And that's something I can even find enjoyment and empowerment in. So that's a conversation we're not having, but that's a conversation I'm committed to when it happens.
And I can see that threaded all throughout your website because your first of all, your website is beautiful, the
Thank you.
graphics, the wordings, and it caused me to really think about my own prejudices, my own limiting beliefs about who people are and how they show up in the world. So I
Mm,
thank you for that. And and we've had conversations that have definitely shifted the way I see the world that I live in because things aren't always as black and white, which your website is a beautiful representation for that. Because when I saw it was like I thought, what a great metaphor. Even the way your website, that may not have been your intention, that may have been your intention, but it's not so black and white. And
I
as you
agree.
read the words, that the impact of the black and white of your website and the words that were on there just really blew me away. With that said, when you are working with people in your transformational coaching, is there an ideal client for you?
Hmm. Yeah, I feel people that I would gravitate towards for the transformation coaching, I feel there are people that could be on the fence.
Mhm.
They can sense that there is more for them to grow into and to become. And there's also this acknowledgement of fear in the process because part of us know that the only way to live up to our own becoming is to interrupt different narratives that we have and stories and old beliefs that we have about ourselves that limit us, right? And that's the scary part. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but we can sense it in our spirit. And that's the scary part. So for me, it's people who already contemplate that and they want to commit themselves to that life of transformation and they're open enough to be disrupted and to be inconvenienced by the process. And so that would be the person I would love to have because I feel, as you said, it's important to have that non-black and white understanding of what transformation is, also through a coaching perspective, is knowing that there's work that will be demanded of me, and I'm willing to do that. And I'm committed to the process enough that anything that will be an inconvenience, I will also receive as a gift. And I know Liza Nicole, she talks it about the gifts wrapped up in sandpapers. She uses
Mhm.
in a different context, but I also see that as that in the sense that, it's the growing pains. You're growing and you're also hurting because you're developing muscles you never had before or you never used before. And so that would be the person. To me, it's really much like a connection on energy levels,
Mhm.
much more than a specific profiles, but definitely somebody, who's an entrepreneur, a healer, an activist, or an artist, and then finds themselves at that crossroad where they know that they cannot continue the way that they've been behaving for the last however many lifetimes.
Mhm.
They're not clear on what transformation will look like, but they know that they're committed to the parts that are less glorifying, but that are just nourishing and necessary. So that would be my ideal person because there's beauty and grace in that work, and there's also work and labor. And one does not deny the other, and both are complementary. So I wouldn't want somebody who believes it's going to be easy peasy. And
Mm-hmm.
no, I want us to acknowledge right from the get go what this entails, but then it's going to be a beautiful journey as well.
I know based on the work that you've done and the initiatives that I've seen you participate in, that you are a person of impact. And with that said, what is your idea of the global social impact that you want to make on the world?
Hmm. Well, yeah. But I want to I have so many dreams and, as you know, aspirations, and they grow. But to me, is one of my greatest commitment is to look at global thought leadership and to have true diversity at the steering wheel. And diversity to me looks like different things. It's very intersectional. So it's race, it's gender, and it's also about being positively disruptive, right? So let's say even within the one industry that there be not what we're observing so much where there's a one dominant narrative and a bunch of
Mm-hmm.
counter narratives that are hidden or part
Mm-hmm.
of a counterculture, but that we be much more apt in decolonizing ourselves continuously. So this idea that we keep on equating how can I be more inclusive as another way for me to be innovational in my industry. So that there be other considerations that make diversity a holistic package as opposed to what it may be seen as, which is a concession, right? So some people that are part of different legacies of privileges feeling like they have to give something away so that now people that are, challenged, quote unquote, in their experience of it now get to be elevated. So
Mm-hmm.
that's not what diversity is like to me, but that's what I've seen it being portrayed as. So to me, it's having, like I said, that leadership that is racially diverse, that is diverse in its gender expression as well, and that it be also completely transdisciplinary. That for us, it would make sense to have an activist sitting at the table with a capitalist, sitting at a table with a socialpreneur, sitting at a table with a digital media activist, and so on and so forth. And then language, because language is also a big part of my experience and of how I've seen discrimination occur too. So for me to have a global thought leadership that looks like that, that is rooted in integrity and that walks the talk, is how I would love to see the world. And the way to there for me is like having summits, for example, and also having transnational collaborations on that level. So to make it normal, to routinize the idea of having this client portfolio and also strategic partner portfolio that have nothing to do but what the expectation of a client and partner portfolio should be like. And that for us, we take this in as part of our dailiness, but we're also really aware that this was not normal 10
Mm-hmm.
years ago or last year, right? So that we don't take it for granted. But yeah, so I guess that's how I would see global social impact to me as something that would have been achieved and that will be achieved in a few years. Yeah.
Now, I believe some of that is addressed in the book that you're about to release pretty soon. Could you tell me about your book, the title, and a little bit about it?
Yes. So the book is called Decolonize Your Language to Sanitize Your Mind. And basically, what I do is I look at ways to better like the emotional and the psychological and energetic ecosystem that we live in,
Mm-hmm.
because we have those recurring thoughts that we have that are very challenging of our own potential. So what I do is I focus on certain words that have been reiterated to me and that automatically they come out to me as being extremely limitation driven. So
Mm-hmm.
what I do is I take that one word, then I expand upon my appreciation of it and how we can destabilize the narratives that the word supports. And then I give people alternate vocabulary. So the next time you want to say, oh, I'm going to try to make it happen, I would say stuff like, I'm going to strive for this. Because in
Mm-hmm.
trying, I'm hearing defeatism. So I already have a way out before I committed to the victory of my
I get
action,
that. I get
right?
that. Right.
So it starts with that. And then one section I've been thinking of adding is first we focus on the individual, like her own recurring thoughts that are that compromise, our potential to expand,
Mm-hmm.
basically. And then the section I'm adding is to connect our individual healing process to a collective social impact. So that's how I make that happen. And yeah, super excited about that book, and it's gonna
I'm
be
excited
fun.
for it too, because I'm a reader and I love the work that you do. So I'm looking forward to what is it? Decolonizing. Say it for me again.
Yes, decolonize your language to sanitize your mind.
And
Yes.
the way I've always thought the way you look at the world is so unique and amazing for me, and I glean so much from it when we do have our conversations. Chesline, when I think about all the work you do and the impact that you have on people, I know for you words matter.
Yeah.
So uh, when I think about the book that you're writing, the work that you do, your website, it all just really runs together in a very unique symphony that says expand your mind. And
Mm.
so I am excited about the projects that you have upcoming, and maybe you'll share a few with us.
Sure, definitely. And also to give you a sense about the book, I'll probably make sure that it's available by April 16th.
Okay.
Because in one of my projects, I will talk to you about that project as well. So it's called BIPOC, as in
Mm-hmm.
buying. So buying
Mm-hmm.
from Black, Indigenous people of color. And
Mm-hmm.
the organizer is amazing. So our name is
Mm-hmm.
Kamina, and we're starting on the local level. So we have 20 plus local young entrepreneur businesses that are BIPOC, and we're getting all featured from April 16th to April 24th. And it's just to encourage, again, allyship and economic development in our
Mm-hmm.
part of the world. And then we're going to expand. So that's one project. And I will make sure to feature it in the coming days on my own platforms, because I've been
Mm-hmm.
really busy on Kamina's platform. She's an incredible
Yeah.
soul. And if not, a few other projects, what I'm up to, there's my summit that I'm organizing
Mm-hmm.
for this summer. And it basically resonates with what my vision of, social impact in the future is.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm having a bunch of speakers, all coming from different transdisciplinary niches, different languages, and we sit down and we have a heart to heart. And together, we decolonize what it means for them to do what they do. And then we share that with the audience, and I coach the audience after the conversation for them to be empowered to know, what does that look like in my life, and how does that information translate to my day to day. So this is a big one coming up for July, August, so late July, early August. And if not, I have a bunch of other stuff that people can check out. I have the Black Caucus that I'm involved in at my alma mater, and so we are a Black leadership group that is self-organized and that is ensuring that we have an anti-racist, institutionalized way of creating knowledge, and that it becomes a university commitment. So this is another one, and I'm learning so much through the process with my peers. They're incredible souls, and we're telling ourselves this is a historical moment
Mm-hmm.
that we as Black, and we all come from different disciplines, but me as a Black queer graduate students, and then working with profs, faculty, and students, and we're all Black, and we're all committed to that vision, and we're all coming in very complementarily. So those would be some highlights.
As I can see, you're very busy and you have a lot going on. Tell me, how does healing and how does the healing and positive disruption help you live your best life now?
I feel it gives me more than what I could ever have had otherwise. Because, as Janet Mugg said, we live in systems intent on our destruction as marginalized bodies and voices. And when you're healed is when you can truly transcend that intention from the system. And so for me, is getting to do work with people who would not necessarily have welcomed me. And they're not necessarily welcoming of me either. And
Mm-hmm.
yet, because internally I have that compass, I'm not phased by their perception, and I'm creating a space where we can turn it around, and it's mutually honoring in the process. So I feel that when you're healed, you can be empowered anywhere, and you do it so beautifully and gracefully and welcomingly that people who were set to prejudice, against you, now there are people that will fight for you and with you. And the positive disruption, to me, it allows me to look at limitations as something that is negotiable, and to look at possibility as the one thing that defines my reality.
Well, that's a mouthful. Tell me, Shazzy, how do people contact you if they want to be coached by you, locate your book, or just basically find out more about you and the many languages you speak and the programs and initiatives that you support?
Amazing. So I would say my website would be the best go-to for all of the above. So it's, chesline.com. So Chesline.com. And there you have the page on my services. If you're interested in getting coached, whether it be for the transformation or the social impact, then you have my free world-class digital education platform. And I put there podcast interviews, my micro podcast, my blog, so much content, honestly, because of my commitment to, free access to knowledge, empowerment, and education. And so that would be the biggest, way to interact with all of my content. And I have workshop sessions that I put up for free there. And people can also join in for my free webinar that I do every Thursday. So I would say start with the website. And if you're more on Insta, I'm also on Instagram and on Facebook, but I would say my website would be the best way to get the fullest sense of who I am and what I'm here to do and how we can come together.
But we'll make sure to put your website in the description box below. Chesline, thank you so much for coming to talk to me. And if you will stand by while I take the time to thank a veteran. You guys, as always, at the end of the show, I like to remind everyone to please thank a veteran. Go to www.nevcc.org/projects and take the time to pick one of the 12 months and thank a veteran. January was a fresh start, and there are different themes throughout the year. There are 12 themes. You get to pick one that you like the most or do one for each and every month. At the end of the year, we will compile all of those thank yous, and lucky veterans on January 1st will receive a gift basket that will include this book with all the thank yous from those people that took the time to thank a veteran. Remember, when you're asleep at night, you're walking around talking, having fun, playing with your friends or your frenemies, there is someone somewhere uncomfortable standing on a wall, sleeping in a ditch, doing something you refuse to do just so that you can live a happy life. Well, take the time to thank a veteran. Chesline, thank you for coming to the show. I look forward to every time we get to interact. I can't wait for the summit. Looking forward to the book. And I hope that when the book comes out, you will come back and discuss the book with me in detail. Thank you for coming to talk to me.
Thank you for having me.
Remember, everyone, the choices you make today will be the reality you live tomorrow. Choose wisely. Be blessed.